All right, it being 5 o'clock, I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Camarillo Library Board for today, Wednesday, November 4th, 2020. And can we have a roll call?
Trustee Craven?
Here.
Trustee Kildee?
Here.
Trustee Tremblay?
Here.
President Pro Tem Santangelo?
Here.
President Moshe?
Present. Thank you. To make it easy, I'll lead everyone in the flag salute. So if you'll please stand, put your right hand over your heart, and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do we have any amendments to this agenda?
No amendments to the agenda.
And do we have any public comments?
No public comments.
All right, that'll move us down to the consent calendar.
Move consent.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. And just to check with the clerk, do we have any public comments on the consent calendar?
No public comments.
All right. I have a motion and a second. Please call the vote.
Trustee Craven?
Yes.
Trustee Kildee?
Yes.
Trustee Tremblay?
Yes.
President Pro Tem Santangelo?
Yes.
President Moshe?
Yes.
That motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much. Do we have any comments from staff?
No comments from staff.
And do the library trustees have any comments? Seeing none, I'm going to adjourn the meeting of the Camarillo Library Board.
Call this meeting of the Camarillo Sanitary District Board of Directors to order. Ask the record to reflect that all board members are present. Are there any amendments to this agenda?
No amendments.
Do we have any public comments?
No public comments.
That gets us to the consent calendar, which consists of the minutes of the October 28 meeting.
Move the approval.
Second.
It's a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Could we have a roll call, please?
Director Tremblay?
Yes.
Director Santangelo?
Yes.
Director Moshe?
Yes.
Secretary Kildee?
Yes.
Chair Craven?
Yes.
That motion carries unanimously.
The next item on the agenda is a closed session. I'm going to ask the city attorney to read the words now under the circumstances that we can meet in closed session. However, I will then recess the meeting and we'll call it to order later, probably about 6:30 or when the city council meeting takes a break. So could the city attorney tell us the reasons why we are meeting in closed session?
Yes, we have a closed session conference with legal counsel, existing litigation. The name of the case is Southern California Alliance of POTW versus US EPA. That's pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9, paragraph 1, subdivision D. And we also have a conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation. That would be initiation of litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9 D4. The number of potential cases is 1.
Okay, and with that, I will recess the Camarillo Sanitary District Board meeting.
Tony, you're muted.
Well, let me start over again. Sorry about that, everyone. So with that, I will go ahead and call this adjourned regular meeting of the Camarillo City Council for Wednesday, November 4, 2020 to order. Are there any amendments to the agenda?
No amendments to the agenda.
All right, let's move to, actually, before we go, to follow up on what Mrs. Craven said, my thought was that we would go ahead and go through the 5 o'clock docket or 5 o'clock calendar, see how far we can get, hopefully for most, if not all of it, and then recess probably around somewhere between 6:30 to 6:45, move into the closed session relative to the sanitary district. Any objections to that? All right, hearing none, let's go ahead then with consent calendar.
Move the approval.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to pull F.
Certainly. Okay, we will go ahead and pull consent calendar item F. Ms. Santangelo, we'll come right back to it after the rest of the consent calendar.
I would like to amend my motion to approve the consent calendar with the exception of item F. And where's that being moved? To Public Works or Planning?
Actually, I think we'll go ahead and deal with it right after the rest of.
Which will be taken up later in the meeting. How's that?
Sure.
Later, anything after the consent calendar.
I'll second the motion.
All right. We have I think, we have a motion and a second with respect to consent calendar items A through E respectively. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Craven,
Yes.
Councilmember Kildee,
Yes.
Councilmember Mulchay,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Santangelo,
Yes.
Mayor Tremblay.
Yes.
That motion carries unanimously.
All right. And it's now later in the meeting. So we will now go ahead and consider consent calendar item F. And Madam Vice Mayor, I think you had a question or something on this item.
I'm just a little bit concerned about rescinding this at this point. I don't know if anybody's paying attention to the numbers, but we're not really going down anymore. We're headed into holiday season where people are going to be gathering more, and flu season, and most people are thinking that numbers are going to go up. And so I'm just a little bit concerned if this maybe is a little bit too early.
Mr. Vaca or Mr. Moe, can you respond, please?
Sure. I would just share that when we started working on this, we were in a scenario where cases were on the decline, and we were looking to be in different tiers in the less restrictive tier with the county. And I believe that the information has changed and pivoted since we started working on this update. And so the numbers haven't continued on the downward trend that we anticipated when we drafted this. So I would share that information in response to Vice Mayor Santangelo.
Yeah. I kind of figured that it was done, a little bit. I mean, everything's changing daily. So, but that's why I wanted to open it up for discussion and see if anybody else agreed. But I can tell you personally how I've spent my last week dealing with this pandemic, but it's no joke. It's in our county, and I don't see the numbers going down. And from everybody I've spoken to at Public Health, the thought is that things are going to get worse before they get better. So.
So again, I would share that we did anticipate being in the orange tier by the end of October or early November, which we're where we're at. We were thinking that would happen as early as October 27th, and that has not happened yet. So I would offer that information for the council's consideration.
All right. I think I saw Mrs. Craven's hand first and then followed by Mr. Mulchay. Mrs. Craven.
Yeah, in spite of the numbers staying the same, I have been watching very carefully, and there were 3 very large motorhomes in my neighborhood. One of them had an RV, but then up to a fairly long trailer. So I should have said there are 3 trailers in my neighborhood plus an RV. I did not see any of them being used to have somebody isolated. They were used, all the people went away on weekends and came back and just left them parked, with the exception of one. One trailer, he parks it by noon on Monday and gets it out by noon on Friday. The other one, after years of code enforcement getting after him, quit parking it illegally and finally built a place to park it. But these, as I've noted, were not used to isolate anybody. If they're in a location as they should be, as they normally would have been before we rescinded the the requirements, they could still be brought out. We have a process for people being able to get a permit at the police station and park them there. And I think it's up to 2 weeks a year. And I'm sure that we could some way make that permit extendable if the people had COVID or had been exposed to COVID. But if one person were exposed to COVID, the 2 weeks would take care of the quarantine if they did not come down with it. So I don't know. I've seen a lot of abuse of this, in my opinion. So I just wanted to throw it out there.
All right, I think Mr. Mulchay is next.
I will add that, and the Vice Mayor made a good point. She's talked about going into the holiday season, and that kind of jogged my memory. I've had two separate, although it's anecdotal, I've had two separate conversations with individuals and talking about how they're approaching the holidays in COVID times. And both of that, I mean, I've talked to a lot of people, but two of which indicated that they are still wanting to get together with family, but they're not wanting to stay in a hotel. They're concerned that there are going to be too many people in the hotel, especially grandparents who still want to travel. And so they're opting to utilize motorhomes to stay outside the residences of family members they're visiting. So that way they can stay close. They're only amongst family, and they're going to try to keep it that way. And that's kind of their mode of, or means by which they're going to approach the holidays. So I know that there are a lot of people who are just simply opting not to travel and not to go anywhere. Though I also know people who, still have that have very close-knit family, and they're, they'll be damned if anything is going to get between them and today Christmas or Thanksgiving. So I would be supportive of holding off on this, not just in light of the fact that our numbers are not rescinding or going down like we had originally anticipated, but the fact that I think the holidays for some, this would be very helpful for them if they're wanting to still have family in town and not have to, be around a hotel environment. So.
Mr. Kildee.
Yeah, my concern is what Mrs. Craven has said, that I have no problem with people using it for a reasonable usage, of course. That's why it was implemented here. But if there is abuses, I think we need to take a look at that. I'm certainly willing to look into perhaps extending it for maybe a month, maybe through the holiday season if we see that that's necessary. But I think we got to look at some data before we do that, and perhaps we want to just wait a few weeks and maybe talk about this a few weeks from now and really see. We'll have somewhat of a better idea when the numbers are in a couple of weeks here. But if it's used for what it's intended to be used for, I have no problem of extending it. But I think we really need to take a look at the time factor on this. We certainly don't want a whole bunch of them in neighborhoods that are not being used for the purposes that they were intended to.
For my part, I had asked Mr. Vaca a series of questions about the noticing, that would go out if the council went ahead and implemented this item tonight. And one of the questions I had posed is, so what happens if the pandemic worsens over the next few months? And it's actually quite along the lines of what the Vice Mayor has articulated. And the answer back was, and it's called out in the staff report, the answer is that the city could use its reasonable accommodations ordinance if the pandemic worsens. That's fine, but on the other hand, I think the Vice Mayor's comments about how the numbers may be changing from day to day, I don't know that there are a lot of folks who really know that they can go to City Hall and ask for self-quarantining, et cetera. So my thought would be kind of the middle ground here. My suggestion would be, why don't we defer this to our next regular meeting to ask Mr. Vaca and Community Development to give us some additional data on what, if any, issues are there going on right now with this. And then on November 18th, consider whether or not we want to try to extend this or defer this item further until maybe the first regular meeting of January in order to get through the holidays. But I'm just thinking of, one step at a time. My thought would be, why don't we defer this until the next regular meeting on I believe it's the 18th.
Your Honor,
Yes, Mrs. Craven.
I just wanted to point out that the 18th happens to be a special meeting. The next regular meeting is in December, but that's a nit.
No, that's okay. You're quite correct. The meeting on the 18th concerns, let's see, I'm trying to
We
remember.
changed December, so they're both special meetings.
We did, okay.
I mean, we changed November.
I would still add it as an agenda item for the 18th if council is willing to do that and go that direction, and we can talk about this again in 2 weeks.
I would support that.
I'd support that.
Would you like a motion?
I think probably a motion would be appropriate in this instance. Yes.
I move we defer discussion on this item until the next meeting when we have a chance to get more data.
I'll
I'll
second.
second them. I'll withdraw.
Okay, I think the motion was by Mrs. Craven with a second by the Vice Mayor. And with that, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Craven,
Yes.
Councilmember Kildee,
Yes.
Councilmember Molche,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Santangelo,
Yes.
Mayor Tremblay.
Yes.
That motion carries unanimously.
Okay, thank you, Jeffrey. With that, then, we will move on to item 3A, Public Works on the agenda, which has to do with the North Pleasant Valley groundwater desalter conveyance pipelines. And I believe Mr. Klotzel is ready to address us.
Yes, thank you,
Mr.
Mayor
Klotzel.
Tremblay. Yes, I'll be sharing my screen now. And you should be able to see the title slide with a seal on your screens.
Yes, we
So
can.
yes, thank you. This item is to award a contract for construction of the conveyance pipelines for the desalter project. There we go. The desalter is under construction at the 5-acre site at the northwest corner of Lewis and Las Posas roads. This conveyance pipeline project includes pipelines from wells A and B to supply raw water to the desalter site. Those pipelines are shown in blue from wells A and B at the hospital and medical center plaza, and continuing east on Mar Vista, and then through the library property and through a easement from the church to the desalter site. The project also includes a storm drain to convey stormwater from the desalter site out to a connection that's this little red dot here shown at the corner of the library property and the high school driveway to connection to an existing storm drain, which will drain the site of stormwater. The project also includes a brine line to serve the Pleasant Valley Mutual reverse osmosis treatment plant. Pleasant Valley is in the final stages and moving forward with their planned desalter project, similar to what we are constructing, but on a very much smaller scale. And that requires the discharge of brine. And that's the green pipeline that, under separate agreement with Pleasant Valley Mutual, the city is designing and then constructing the pipeline for Pleasant Valley Mutual under a reimbursement agreement. So the costs with that Pleasant Valley Mutual brine line will all be reimbursed to the city, but included in this construction project to take advantage of a one-time construction out there, a joint trench. You see the green line of that brine line following the same alignment as the blue raw water pipeline. The Pleasant Valley brine will come through into the desalter site and then join with the city's discharge of brine out to the Cayugas Salinity Management Pipeline in Lewis Road. So that's also included in this project. And we put the project out to bid and received 7 bids on October 21st of this year. And the structure of the bid package was a base bid plus 2 alternate bid items. The base bid is the raw water pipeline from wells A and B, the storm drain pipeline, and the Pleasant Valley Mutual brine pipeline. We also added 2 alternate bid items, one being for PVC communication conduit, and that would be in place with the same pipeline installation and provide a conduit for communication lines between the desalter and the well sites. So we included that in the project. And then alternate bid item number 2 was to add in the treated water pipeline that's necessary from the treatment plant, treated water out to connection to the city's distribution pipeline in Las Posas Road. So that's what the bid package was, a base bid and 2 alternate bid items. And the lowest responsive bidder is Blois Construction Incorporated. And their bid is comprised of the desalter pipelines, which are the raw water pipelines and the storm drain at the amount shown there. And the Pleasant Valley Mutual brine pipeline, we had a separate bid item for that as a part of the base bid. So it's all segregated for the actual Pleasant Valley Mutual cost, which will be reimbursed at just over $610,000. The alternate number 1 for the PVC communication conduits was right under $160,000. And the alternate bid item number 2 for the treated water pipeline at just under $200,000. Total bid from Blois was $2.8 million. And I will mention this ended up being a very favorable price. The engineer's estimate was right at around $3 million. So this bid price is actually about $200,000 under the engineer's estimate. So it was very favorable. And tonight the recommendation is to award the contract for construction of the pipelines to Blois Construction without bid alternate number 1 for those PVC communication conduits. What staff did is included that to see what the price would be to take advantage of the one project installing these conduits also. And the price is not favorable. That $160,000 we feel is on the high side for this installation. And plus the fact that we have a suitable alternate for communications using wireless radio between the desalter and the well sites, which are immediately to the west. And we have a good line of sight for radio communications there. So we're recommending not including the PVC communication conduit in this project, but going ahead and including the treated water pipeline for that recommended amount of $2.6 million. Also recommend a 10% contingency for unforeseen additional work for a total city council authorization tonight with this award of $2,920,796. Now that we have the conveyance pipeline costs better defined, we also wanted to give council an update to the overall total estimated desalter project costs. Back in June of last year, at the time of award, we presented the estimated cost numbers shown in the June 2019 column, and at a total estimated cost of $66.3 million. We are 14 months into construction on the desalter and wanted to bring this update of the costs to council that are shown in the November column. There's been some increases and some decreases, and I'll point out a couple of the changes. Starting out with in the construction phase, what we've done is lowered the contingency amount to 5%. Initial contract was right over $40 million. And at that time of award, we included a standard 10% contingency at that time for the $44.2 million of the June estimate. Right now, we're projecting around $1 million total in additional costs to that contract. Some of that is planned change orders, knowing, if you recall, going into the project, we had several items that needed to be finalized. For instance, the connection out to Lewis Road and some other items. So we had a higher contingency amount. And now, as we're moving forward, again, after the 14 months, we have a better idea that we'll likely not exceed $2 million in contingency needs for the project. So we've taken that $2 million out of the total treatment plant project and the new number at $42.2 million for the treatment plant. Next number, the conveyance pipeline. was increased, and that is reflecting the actual bid amount from Blois for just the raw water pipelines, plus a 10% contingency. Next item, the salinity management pipeline connection. Council likely recalls not too long ago, we had an item regarding that for additional monies based on the actual bid cost. Now that part of the construction was bid and is being constructed by a contractor through Cayugas Municipal Water District, because it's their connection to the brine line, and we're reimbursing, but that's an update to that actual number of just under $1 million for that. The next item actually came down, and that incorporates the treated water pipeline portion of this contract. And again, we have a better feel now of what these other additional costs are to come up with that updated number. The well A and B rehab project, which is in the design phase, will be coming to council eventually for award of that. The amount of work that's needed at the wells ends up being with an estimate of $1 million. The monitoring wells ended up costing less than what we had initially estimated. So that's good news. We're done with the monitoring wells. We are actually able to utilize a new well that got put in through Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency through a state grant to install a well for these purposes. So that was good news there. And then a slight adjustment to additional costs needed on the project management, design, engineering, construction management, and inspection. We also then are continuing on allowing for additional contingencies for any other unforeseen items. So with that new updated total, still right at $66.3 million. Again, some increases, some decreases. Moving on to the project funding. Again, an update from what was presented prior, and the numbers have been updated to reflect actual amounts for the Prop 84 grant at the 4.9 million. We had been reflecting around $5 million there. The actual is 4.9, and then our the bond issuance number had been a previous estimate. Now this is the actual, the 12.7 million on the bond issuance. And then to match that updated cost of the 66.294, we've got $10,000 more of unrestricted water funds that are currently available that we're showing in that updated number there. I'll touch on the federal grant from U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. We've have the $5 million approved, and we're moving forward and actually getting close to submitting for reimbursement on the first portion of the construction on that. And council may recall that we did continue to apply for the remaining amount that we're eligible for. The project is eligible for a total of about 16.5 million under this USBR grant, and we received 5. So our application is in right now for the remaining 11.5 million. That application is still pending. We are eligible, and we're just waiting word on the next amount of award for that grant. And the nice thing about this grant is that we remain eligible on into the future, even after the project is constructed, as the federal government appropriates money to this grant program. We will continue to be eligible for that up to the total amount of 16.5 million. So we're hopeful that we will get additional funding through the federal USBR grant. So to touch on where we are now in the project, I mentioned under construction for about 14 months. And next step, we'll be coming back to council. We're planning for the November 18th meeting, the next meeting, to award an agreement for the contract operations. With that cost known at that point, we'll also be bringing back an update to council on the total cost of water and also expected savings over the life of the project due to the not having to purchase as much imported water from Cayugas. So we'll also be updating council with that information as we come back with that operations agreement. The conveyance pipeline project, if awarded tonight, there'll be a finalization of the contract documents, submittal process with actual construction expected to occur out there on the street in the January timeframe. So January to April, the pipelines will be installed, with completion of the treatment facility scheduled for in the spring of 2021. And then moving into the startup, testing, and permitting of the facility through summer of next year. with delivery of treated water scheduled for October of 2021. So that concludes staff's presentation here, and just want to reiterate, we're very thankful to say the DeSalter project remains on schedule and within budget.
Thank you, Mr. Klotzel. Do members of the council have questions for Mr. Klotzel? Mr. Kildee.
Yeah, Mr. Klotzel, I'm a little curious as the unresponsive nature of so many bidders, and it was typically, it appears it was under the caveat of one specific item that either they didn't understand or they hadn't really dealt with this type of a project before. I'm not quite sure what it is, but it is somewhat curious on my part. I understand it's somewhat of a moot point, but was it not spelled out correctly? And I'm just bringing that up. So if that's the case, perhaps we in the future, we can alleviate if that's one of the issues with this.
Sure. No, understand the question. No, it wasn't left out or ambiguous. It's a clear requirement of the bidding documents. It is additional paperwork, some on the required forms and those kinds of things that, for whatever reason, a number of the contractors did not provide that required information.
Okay, and I have another question about the preferred contractor here, Boyce Construction. We have used them in the past on several occasions, and you're confident that they can fulfill this potential contract if it is awarded?
Yes.
Okay. One other just really quick question, or just really quick comment. I just want to commend you for working through this and looking into the cost management as an ongoing operation on this project. I commend you on that and your staff. That's all I have, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mrs. Craven?
I just have one question. Blois is the company that did the construction of the brine line through, the brine line, right?
You mean Fort Callegus, the actual
Fort Callegus, I'm sorry.
Big pipeline in
Lewis.
I know they have been a contractor on that project. That the brine line from it's gone all the way up towards Somis now, and then all the way out to Port Hueneme. I believe that was several different contracts. Not sure if Blois did all of it, but you're correct. I believe they have at least constructed a portion of that pipeline, and they are the successful bidder on the connection to the brine line for the DeSalter project. Again, that was a separate bid and award process through Callegus Municipal Water District, and Blois is the contractor on that also.
I know I'd seen their equipment on Lewis Road down by Temple probably a year ago, maybe a little more. And I also saw it out on Hueneme Road. So I had thought they were. That makes it good. They know exactly where they're going, what they're doing, and all about the Callegus part of the connection. And if they're doing the connection as well, that's also good, although it costs twice as much as we thought it was going to. But I think this is good to have the same company doing all these things.
All right. Are there other council members have any questions? I actually have two for Dave. Dave, both my questions are with respect to the United States Bureau of Reclamation grant funding program. I mean, I note that the original application went in about 16 months ago, June of 2019. First question is, do we have any ETA on when there's going to be a response to that application?
No, not at all. We've been in regular contact with our local contact with Bureau of Reclamation, who then speaks to Denver and that group there. And what we do here is that everything's in place and applications are ready to go. Once then there's the additional step where the budget group in Washington needs to basically release the funds to then for Bureau of Rec to actually say the dollar amount. So they don't say, mum's the word right now. They don't say anything at all. But all indications are that once that step happens, that the grant is funded out of Washington, then we'll know how much we're going to be getting. So yeah, unfortunately, the timing is real similar to the first award. We're at about that same 16-month period or so that we ended up hearing. So hopefully we'll hear soon, and we'll be sure to let council know as soon as we do.
Okay, my second question was actually could have been question number one, which is, are we confident that the current USBR grant program is fully funded and funds have been authorized and appropriated by Congress for that grant funding?
So that, yes, I mean, that's what they call a availability of funding each round. So the first round, there was availability of funding and that we applied for. We got the $5 million out of that. Now the second round, the announcement of availability of funding was, I'm not sure the total dollar amount off the top of my head. I think it might have been 30 million or so, to be spread amongst a handful of projects that are already pre-approved for eligibility. So that dollar amount, yes, has been committed. Again, it still takes that final step of having the money flow from Washington to the Bureau of Rec. So on paper, yes, the money's been identified as being programmed, and then it just needs to be appropriated, if you will.
Okay, thank you very much. If there are no other questions of Mr. Klotzel, let me turn then and ask, is there anyone who wishes to make a public comment on this item? I'm looking at my screen and I don't see anyone who wishes to make a public comment. Madam Clerk, can you confirm that?
That's correct.
All right, then we're going to bring it back to council at this point for further discussion and action. Mrs. Craven.
I'll move the approval of the item.
I'll second the motion.
All right, we have a motion by Mrs. Craven and a second by Councilmember Kildee. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Craven,
Yes.
Councilmember Kildee,
Yes.
Councilmember Molche,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Santangelo,
Yes.
Mayor Tremblay.
Yes.
That motion carries unanimously.
All right, thank you, Mr. Klotzel. Thank you very much. We will now go to item 4A on the 5 o'clock calendar, and that is zoning ordinance amendment permitting process to review and approve conditional use permits. And I believe, Mr. Vaca, you are going to address that.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Tremblay. So tonight I'm going to present an idea for the City Council to consider for allowing us to work towards initiating a zoning ordinance amendment to create a permitting process to allow the director to approve conditional use permits. So on September 5th of 2018, the City Council approved and adopted the city's economic development strategic plan. This update that we're presenting this evening for an ordinance amendment is intended to expedite the approval and permitting of certain new businesses and development projects that currently require approval of a conditional use permit by our city's planning commission after holding a public hearing. The concept is to allow the director to review and approve certain conditional use permits, and this would likely have a positive impact on our city's business and development friendliness perceived from our business community. And this would be consistent with the implementation measures of our economic development strategic plan. I'd like to highlight a few of the strategies that exist within our strategic plan. And first is for us to have a Get to Yes team that has been formed. That consists predominantly of our city manager, Ramirez, and assistant city manager, Ms. Nichols, and various staff members. And we have been looking at procedures and the ways in which we can achieve streamlined permitting to help with business development and to facilitate business development friendliness. We have audited our current permitting procedures and investigated options to expedite the approvals and introduce more flexibility. And so the concept that I'm presenting this evening is in result to these strategies. I would like to highlight that the strategic plan has listed both of the categories on the prior slide as first priorities for implementation. Based on that, staff has worked together to develop this concept. And if we move forward, it will be used as a functional tool that will implement intended streamlining, and it will facilitate business growth in these sectors. This may also provide streamlining to help businesses that may have been impacted from the COVID-19 pandemic. We analyzed the recent conditional use permit history and realized that from 2009 to present, there have been a total of 13 conditional use permits that went to the Planning Commission and were approved after they held a public hearing. And those 13 were for restaurants to also allow off-sale alcohol sales, breweries and wineries, independent of each other in some instances, and child daycare facilities. 10 out of those 13 conditional use permits have been approved from 2015 to present. And this demonstrates a trend of recently permitting more of these types of uses. Restaurants are currently permitted to have on-site alcohol sales and consumption by right in the commercial zone. And those zones include the Camarillo Commons Mixed Use Zone, Village Commercial Mixed Use Zone, our Camarillo Old Town Zone, and our Commercial Plan Development Zone. So the proposal would allow the director to review and approve conditional use permits. We would include public noticing, and it would be in commercial zones to allow restaurants that want to offer beer and wine for off sale for customers that have dined at their business or are purchasing takeout. Typically, restaurants that include craft microbrewery products and wine, they do desire to provide these products for sale as an ancillary use with their restaurant, but this currently requires a conditional use permit approval by the Planning Commission. And so one quick example is Realm Restaurant that is currently open in Camarillo. Originally open as a restaurant that provided alcohol consumption and sale of alcohol for on-site consumption with the restaurant service, but they had to go through the Planning Commission to get an approval of a conditional use permit in order to sell bottles of wine to people or craft beer to people that they could then take home. So this would expedite that process and streamline it. It's important to share with the City Council that recently with the COVID-19 pandemic, the State Department of Alcohol Beverage Control has relaxed their standards and have been allowing concurrent off-sale of alcohol beverages, including beer and wine, and even cocktails with takeout food orders. And this has been allowed without a conditional use permit. Planning staff reached out with the Camarillo Police Department, and we have recognized that there has not been any problems or impacts to the city from these relaxed standards over these past 7 months. Also in our commercial zones, the current zoning ordinance defines drinking establishments as an establishment that's engaged in the preparation and retail sale of alcoholic beverages for consumption on the premises, but does not include a tasting area as defined in this chapter. And typical uses include bars, brew pubs, cocktail lounges, taverns, and similar other uses than ancillary to a restaurant use where the sale of food is 51% or more of total sales. So right now, craft breweries and wineries are considered drinking establishments, and staff would recommend that we update the code to allow a director-approved CUP instead of a full Planning Commission CUP with the public hearing in these zones, and allow for both on-site consumption and off sales so customers can purchase craft beer and or wine in sealed containers to be consumed off the premises of the business. We do, however, recommend that bars, cocktail lounges, taverns, and similar uses all still require a full conditional use permit to be reviewed by the Planning Commission. Also, breweries, wineries, and distilleries with or without tasting areas that include retail sales of alcoholic beverages that are manufactured on site or will be consumed off the premises are currently allowed with the conditional use permit by our Planning Commission at a public hearing in 4 zoning districts, and that includes our service commercial zone, limited manufacturing zone, our light manufacturing zone, and our general manufacturing zone. And staff recommends updating the zoning procedures to allow for breweries, wineries, and distilleries with or without tasting areas, including retail sales of the alcoholic beverages with a director level conditional use permit in these zones. Daycares providing care for more than 6 children are currently allowed with the conditional use permit after review and approval by the Planning Commission at a public hearing in 2 zoning districts, and that is the professional office zone and the commercial plan development zone. To help facilitate daycare businesses and to accommodate childcare coverage during the COVID-19 pandemic and into the future, staff would recommend that we update the code and allow a director level approval for these types of daycare facilities in the professional office zone and commercial plan development zone. And some of you may be familiar with the Montessori daycare facility on the corner of Adolfo and Santa Rosa Road. And that business was required to go through a public hearing before our planning commission with the conditional use permit before it could operate. So we'd like to streamline that process. Staff did research what other cities are doing regionally, and we discovered that 5 jurisdictions do have ordinances that allow for the directors of community development or their planning directors to review and approve various conditional use permits. And that is in the cities of Port Hueneme and Ventura, Thousand Oaks, and Moore Park, and then also in the county of Ventura. Currently, our conditional use permit fees are approximately $20,000 for a complex conditional use permit. Complex conditional use permit would be an example of a combined church and school master plan facility. But most of the conditional use permits we process are considered simple conditional use permits, but those still cost $6,600. So for a restaurant that serves beer and or wine or alcohol as part of their restaurant operation, that's allowed by right. But if they want to sell bottles of wine to customer so they could take a nice bottle of wine that they may not have experienced or tasted before home with them, then they need a conditional use permit. It's an additional $6,600 and a public hearing review process that takes a good amount of time. So we would anticipate that the director conditional use permit fee would likely require approximately half of the time spent on a simple CUP that goes before our planning commission. So we would anticipate that that would require approximately half the cost of the current simple CUP fee. So this has not been established yet, but that would need further analysis, but that's what our starting point would probably be. So again, staff is proposing now for the director to have the ability to administratively issue conditional use permits. We would include a provision for public noticing, and of course, we would have appeal process and period. We would follow our traditional noticing procedures prior to the issuance of a decision, 10 days prior to making any decision. We would notify all property owners within 600 feet of the proposal, and we would mail them notices, and we'd also require a sign on the property and advertisement in a newspaper. And any interested person could appeal the director's decision. Of course, this isn't established yet, but these are the procedures that we would use as a starting point. City Council could also order a review of a director's decision, and the Planning Commission could also appeal a decision. And if staff thought that there was a challenging factor that needed to be elevated to the Planning Commission, we could always do that as well if this gets effectuated. And like a Planning Commission approved conditional use permit, the director conditional use permit would be revocable if there are problems after a noticed administrative review process. So that would help if there were ever any nuisance issues that arose. Part of the reason that we do conditional use permits is predominantly to address the compatibility of the various land uses to ensure that all property owners get to receive the full enjoyment and benefits of their property and do not have any undue impacts. And so we would still have the ability to impose conditions of approval with the director issued conditional use permit. We could address various factors, including but not limited to parking, regulation of nuisances such as glare or light spillover or noise or vibration, regulation of building structures, placement and design, provision for sanitary facilities, address solid waste collection and disposal, We would have the applications reviewed and address security and safety measures, and we could include any conditions required by our police department. We would regulate, if necessary, hours of operation and days of operation. We would ensure compliance with state requirements, for instance, with daycares and or with alcoholic beverage service through our state ABC offices that we work with, and any other conditions that we feel would be necessary to ensure that the use as proposed is orderly and compatible with the adjoining properties. So I would conclude that I want to share that this concept for a director conditional use permit would bridge a gap that exists right now between allowed uses that are permitted by right and then those conditionally permitted uses that require a public hearing before our planning commission. We would ensure, again, through conditions of approval that compatibility is achieved to the maximum extent practicable with conditions of approval and make sure that proposed uses are not otherwise objectionable. This administrative director CUP concept would help ease and streamline these types of land use entitlement decisions. We feel it would improve efficiency in the permitting and shortening the time needed for review, and we would expect a reduction in fees charged to applicants. Staff did consult with Eric Tennyson, our police chief, who indicated support of this proposed concept. And with that, staff's suggested action is to direct staff to further analyze and ultimately make recommendations to our planning commission and ultimately the city council of a zoning ordinance amendment that would allow the director of community development to approve and issue conditional use permits as outlined with this presentation.
All right, thank you, Mr. Baca. Do any members of the council have questions for Mr. Baca? Mr. Kildee?
Yeah, Mr. Baca, I think you laid it out right. I just want to, for my own edifice and perhaps others, first and foremost, we're looking at this as a growth industry, the microbreweries, restaurants, daycare, have you, if you will, a growth industry. This process will be streamlined, so it'll be quicker than what it is at this particular point, and perhaps more cost-effective too. And it does somewhat bring us in line with what some of our sister cities potentially are in the process of doing and or doing right now. So was this brought up? Were there complaints on this, or was it just something that staff saw that were an issue and needed to be addressed? I know we've been working very hard to get to yes, and this is one of the first steps that perhaps we can do that.
Yes, that's correct. So all the statements you shared with the council and the audience is correct. And we did receive complaints with some of the customers that we worked with in the past because they felt like it was onerous, for instance, to have to get an additional conditional use permit to sell a bottle of wine to patrons that are at their restaurant, enjoying a meal, enjoying a glass of wine, and they say, hey, we really like this red wine from Paso Robles, for instance, that I've never seen before. I'd like to buy a bottle. And then that triggers a conditional use permit before our planning commission. So back in my mind for several years, because that's happened, we have definitely a piqued interest in craft breweries and wineries in Camarillo, and I think we want to facilitate that. And we also do recognize that more and more restaurants do want to offer alcoholic beverages for sale. And I think it's reasonable to do that. And I think that I can address that through a director level conditional use permit without having to take it to a planning commission through a public hearing with a shorter time frame with a more affordable rate.
Does that conclude your questions? You're on mute. I think it does.
It does. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So I know at least one other person raised their hand. Who would like, Mr. Milche, sorry.
Thank you. Joe, like a point of clarification, it's the ABC that ultimately establishes standards for how the packaging for alcoholic beverages for offsite sale.
Yes.
So like institution, for example, they specifically have to seal and if you get a growler, they strap it secure
Yes.
it. So that way it
Correct.
you can't just go and pop it open, or it can't open up on its own in your car
Right.
and transportation and the like, right?
Yes, that's absolutely right.
That was my only question.
Sorry, Mrs. Craven. You're on mute, Charlotte.
Even when we meet weekly, we all forget to unmute. All of these notices that would be put in the paper would tell people if they have comments or questions, how to and where to submit their comments. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay. And we're only talking about CUPs for breweries, wineries, distilleries, and daycares, not any other kind of CUP.
that's correct. And we're looking at a conditional use permit at a director level for restaurants that want to sell beer and or wine for customers that are dining at their facility, which, by the way, I outlined they can do currently under the relaxed standards with ABC due to the pandemic.
Right. But other than those, we're not talking about other CUPs that require.
No,
Okay.
and I was really trying to strike a balance of pushing the envelope as much as I can, since this is new, to achieve something that I think is substantial enough to help our business community, but not go too far to where we bite off more than we can chew. So I think this is a really good sample size. And then in the future, if this gets implemented in a year from now and it's working well, then maybe we can start analyzing other uses as well to see if we can streamline other permitting procedures.
I think that's a good approach. And I think just one more question. This is only on these sales that have already been approved by the ABC. Their liquor licenses would still come to us in the same fashion they always have.
For now, yes. We do anticipate bringing forward a potential update to that process as well as part of our Get to Yes, facilitating and streamlining and improving efficiencies. And that will definitely go through council for review and approval at some point here in the near future.
But that's not part of this.
Correct.
Okay.
That's right. And also, I would like to let everyone know that we have, based on workload and juggling various demands, still been trying to get to the zoning ordinance amendment that will include allowing beer and or wine or alcohol sales at our movie theaters. And we still anticipate requiring a conditional use permit for that. So that's still in process. It's just with other more important priorities that we've had to get to. Not that that's not important, but it's just based on our priorities that's been delayed a bit.
That's also coming to us separately.
Absolutely right. And it still will be with a standard conditional use permit. Since that's brand new, we think that's appropriate to keep that where we started.
That's all I have, Your Honor.
There we go. I'm doing it to myself again. Mr. Mulchay, did you have another question?
I had one follow-up for Joe. Joe, and sorry to put you on the spot. If you can give me a kind of a round number of all the CUPs that go through your department on an annual basis, what percentage approximately might be applicable to this?
I'd say within the last 5 years, I'd say probably 60% or so.
Oh, okay.
So it's a higher number, and that's why I recognize the need and the opportunity to include some streamlining, because believe me, it's better for us as well too. If we can do this in a quicker, more administrative fashion, it's better for the customer, but it's also better for staff.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Any other questions for Mr. Vaca? Then what I would like to do is see, is there anyone who wishes to make a public comment on this item? If so, please raise your hand. And I do not see anyone on my screen. Madam Clerk, do you see anybody on your screen?
No, I don't see anybody.
All right. Let's bring it back then to council.
If you don't mind, Mayor, on that topic, we did, however, receive a letter in support from a property owner in Old Town that was distributed to the city council.
We did, and I'll just note the quote one sentence out of it. in support, and it says, quote, "This should provide more timely response to relevant requests which lead to enhanced economic vitality in Camarillo."
Thank you.
I was saving that for my comments, Mr. Vaca. There you go. You stole my
Thank you.
thunder. I'm
Thank
teasing.
you. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm just teasing you. All right. Members of the council, what is your pleasure?
I'll move the suggested action.
All right. And I think the vice mayor is doing a second. You're on mute, Susan. Sorry.
Sure, I was just gonna voice my support for it, but that's fine. I can do that in the form of seconding the motion.
Well, let's do a motion. Okay. No, Mr. Kildee has motioned and Vice Mayor Santangelo has seconded. Are there any further comments before we go to a vote?
Okay. Yeah, I just really, I want to commend Mr. Vaca for taking our economic development strategic plan and putting it into action and not letting it sit on a shelf. And this is the kind of stuff that that is important to do. It's important to look at what we've done in the past and not just keep doing it because that's the way we do it. But I think this is a balanced way to move forward. And so I really do support this. And I hope that the lower cost and more streamlined process will assist our businesses. So I'm looking forward to having it come back to us.
And speaking for myself, I agree with the Vice Mayor's comments. Or should I just say ditto? All right. No other comments. Let's go ahead and Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Craven,
Yes.
Councilmember Kildee,
Yes.
Councilmember Molche,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Santangelo,
Yes.
Mayor Tremblay.
And with thanks to Mr. Vaca, yes.
That motion carries unanimously.
All right. That brings us then to new business oral communications. Are there any communications from Mr. Ramirez?
There are not. Sorry about that.
That's all right. All right. How about the city attorney, Mr. Pierrick?
I actually found my mute button and I have no items tonight.
All right. Let's take oral communications from the city council. And I know Mrs. Craven, you have some communications, and we're going to have Mrs. Craven actually provide one of her comments after the item involving Springville tonight. So she wants to reserve a little bit of time on that. So who would like to go first? Don't all go at once. Mrs. Craven.
I have another item, and that is, I guess to tell everybody I'm a slow thinker once again, but at the last council meeting, we were given a presentation by the Pleasant Valley and Recreation and Park District on the Christmas parade. And at the end of the presentation, we were asked for questions, and it wasn't that I didn't ask questions, I just didn't provide my comments. But back in June at budget time, I led the charge for keeping the parade in the budget, but I really didn't have any idea that gathering restrictions would extend this long. And since our last meeting, I've given this a lot of thought because I have several concerns that I wanted to bring up to all of you. And first of all, my personal definition of a parade is something with bands and floats and has lots of kids to draw a lot of participants. Because it's the relatives of the kids who are in there who come and see the parade and their friends. On the other hand, the current plan is to have 2 cars of elected officials followed by Santa and a fire truck escorted by 2 police vehicles. I assume one will be a cycle and one will be a black and white vehicle. That's not really my idea of a parade. So that was my initial thought. And some kids will come out to see Santa and a fire truck, but people don't come out to see elected officials. Your spouse, your children might, but the rest of the people out there just don't care about seeing us in a car in a parade. The The size of this convoy is smaller than many drive-through birthday celebrations, and those don't cost upwards of $20,000 each. So if crowds show up at the park or the parks, the route was modified to go around all the parks. And if crowds show up, if you live really close to a park, I don't see people driving to that park. I see them walking to that park. But if the crowds show up, would that exceed what the county health public health director's definition of a gathering is? Because they have certain numbers, and if we stay in our tier or if we backslide to the other tier, then what's going to happen there? And so I'm asking if any of the rest of you have had similar concerns. I'd like to ask that we try to convene a meeting of the liaison committee with a similar committee of the Recreation and Park District Board and see if something else can be done at a less costly scale. I really do. So it takes two. I just don't know if anybody else has.
All right, I think I saw Mr. Molche's hand first, and Mr. Kildee, you're on deck.
Charlotte, I will agree with your sentiments, and yeah, I will second your suggestion.
All right, I think we have a request and a second. Mr. Kildee, you're in concurrence.
No, I don't need to. I do. My sentiments, I don't need to add anymore.
Okay, all right. Madam Vice Mayor, I see you nodding. Did you have any comments on this one?
No, I would be open to revisiting it. I think it's important we do something. I don't know. I'm trying to still envision us coming together as a community somehow. I don't know if this nails it. I don't know if it's worth the amount of money. So I support the liaison committee meeting and seeing if there's another idea or another way to celebrate the holidays.
All right. Well, I think we're all in concurrence on this. Mr. Pierik, do we need this in a form of a motion, or can this be guidance to staff to ask that a meeting be scheduled for the ad hoc or for the liaison committee with Pleasant Valley Recreation Park District?
Why don't we formalize it with a motion? I think would be best.
Okay, Mrs. Craven, would you do so, please?
I'll move to ask the city manager to call a meeting of the liaison committee with the Pleasant Valley and Recreation and Park District similar committee for the purpose of discussing perhaps a different type of celebration for Christmas, for the holidays, sorry.
I'll second.
And Mr. Molche will second that. All right. Any other comments? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Craven,
Yes.
Councilmember Kildee,
Yes.
Councilmember Molche,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Santangelo,
Yes.
Mayor Tremblay.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right, Mrs. Craven, do you have any other items under oral comments? All right, let's go to who would like to go next under oral communications. Mr. Molche.
I'll be rather quick. Since we met last week, I have not gone to any public meetings, so I have nothing to report on that front. I do want to add that I'm getting a lot of really great feedback from citizens about, or should I say residents, on the LED streetlight retrofit. There's a lot of people who've been very, very supportive of that. They've taken notice. For the few people who have complained that it might be a little bit brighter in its relation to their house or bedroom window or something like that, for anyone watching, please call the city, city's main line. And I know the city and Edison have been responsive in where they can accommodate some sort of shield, then they will. So it's been really great, but I've gotten nothing but a lot of positive feedback. I just want to share that with all of you. That's all I had.
Thank you, Mr. Molche. Who would like to go next? Mr. Kildee.
Yeah, meetings attended October 15th, VRSD, October 15th, the VCOG Administrative Committee. Also, October 15th, I had an EDC meeting, and October 21st, we had a quarterly budget meeting. And I don't want to get into a large discussion with this, but I do live on what is considered the unofficial Christmas street in Camarillo. And there's been a lot of talk in the neighborhood about what to do. And I was kind of going back and forth until I received a letter at our porch last week from an 8-year-old girl that stated, please do not cancel this. We've had a really crummy year along with everybody else. And this is something that we really look forward to. My sister comes home from college and our family comes down and proceeds to enjoy this Christmas. So I am in consultation with city staff and hopefully the county to see how we can proceed with this. So I just wanted everybody to know that it's a work in progress with that. I'm not going to get into a big discussion on anything else, except I would like to thank the voters in the 3rd and 4th district in Camarillo for taking time out and voting and moving forward with their civic duty. And that's all I have tonight, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Kildee. Madam Vice Mayor, would you like to go next?
Sure, thank you. I don't have anything to report since last meeting in terms of meetings attended. I just wanted to give my usual reminder about COVID. And it's sort of related to what we've just been talking to in the last few minutes, that, you know, we can still do things. We can still have certain gatherings. I mean, there are some things that are just not safe, and there's no way to mitigate the risk. But there are a lot of things that we can still do if we are all really careful and we all think about how we're doing it. And most of the tools to protect ourselves in these types of gatherings and social events, especially around the holidays, are pretty simple. And it really is, you know, wearing the mask. It really is washing your hands. You know, if we don't have to cancel Christmas, we definitely shouldn't cancel what's happening. Mr. Kildee, you know, in your neighborhood, I mean, that is just, you know, it's, everybody loves that. But if we do it safely, and if people walk around and remain their you know, remember to keep their social distancing, there are ways to do it safe. And so it's really up to all of us, to all of the community. You know, think about how you're, you know, we're going to do Thanksgiving, but we're going to do it outside and we're going to spread out. And we're going to keep households at one table. So there's ways to do it. So I encourage everybody not to cancel, but to think about how you can creatively innovate and still be able to get your families together and your friends together in a really safe way. And there are ways to do it. So it's not a zero-sum game. It's not all or nothing. That's all.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. Sorry.
You're muted.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. For myself, I know this is a shock to everyone, but I have no meetings to report, at least in the last 7 days. I do have 3 things that I want to briefly talk about. First of all, I want to echo the Vice Mayor's comments with regard to taking the necessary precautions since we're still in the middle of this pandemic. And I would like to make the observation, I really want to compliment people and commend people who are wearing their masks in public settings, in stores, and when people are in close proximity. I think there's a very high compliance rate in Camarillo, and I really want to commend those people who are stepping up and doing that and undertaking the appropriate social distancing measures. So thank you for that. Secondly, I'll echo Mr. Kildee's comments. Just simply thank the voters in districts 3 and 4 for exercising their civic duty. And finally, and this is something different, on the topic of outdoor dining, you will recall that at the last meeting I was talking about the fact that we need to, as a council in my view, continue to think about and put some thought into what's happening as restaurants move back indoors, at least partially, but are struggling with from a capacity standpoint, and what we are doing both now and post-pandemic in terms of continuing to encourage outdoor dining, and trying to keep those things in balance. And I'm hopeful that staff will be coming back to us with some thoughts. And of course, we're hopefully we don't backslide again on going back to the purple tier. But I had a business owner comment to me today, which is interesting, and they were looking at it from a different prism, a restaurant owner, and they said, I have been renting my outdoor furniture, but if council is thinking about trying to make this on a little more permanent basis, or if we're going to continue to have outdoor dining, then maybe I want to go ahead and invest and put capital dollars into that furniture. So there's another reason why I think it's worthwhile to talk about this as a council. All right, that is it from my standpoint. Let me ask of my colleagues, would you prefer to go ahead into closed session now? The time is about 6:16. Should we go ahead and adjourn into closed session now, or would you like to take a break and adjourn into and go to closed session about 6:45? Any preferences? All right, hearing none. We'll go ahead then. Why don't we go ahead and go into closed session now?
Would you like me to call the CAMSAD meeting back to order and go into closed session?
Actually, let me inquire of the city attorney, Mrs. Burek. Brian, is there any concern on going into closed session now as opposed to 6:45 from a timing standpoint?
No.
No. Okay. Yes, Mrs. Craven, could you do so?
So I'll call the Camarillo Sanitary District Board meeting back to order, and we will then go into closed session.
All right. And record will reflect that we'll move into closed session on that item. Thank you. And then we'll be returning at 7:30.
Mr. Mayor?
Oh, yeah.
Quick question. Can we leave this meeting and then come back? The link will still work?
Yes, that's my understanding.
Okay.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and leave this meeting and go to our other meeting. Thank you. Okay, we have a 2-minute warning.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
I think we're at about a 1-minute warning here. All right, we're going to reconvene this meeting of the City Council. And Mrs. Craven,
I will reconvene the meeting of the Camarillo Sanitary District Board of Directors and ask the city attorney if he will read a statement from the closed session.
Yes, I wanted to announce that the Camarillo Sanitary District in closed session this evening authorized the initiation of litigation, and the details regarding that action will become known and be a public record when the action is called. And that's the end of my report.
So with that, I will I'll adjourn this meeting of the Camarillo Sanitary District Board until the special meeting of November 18th.
thank you, Mrs. Craven, and we'll continue with our City Council meeting with item 6, public comments. Is there anyone at this time who wishes to speak under public comments? If so, please raise your hand. I do not see anyone on my list who wishes to speak. Madam Clerk, can you confirm that for me?
I can confirm that.
All right. So hearing no public comments, we will then move to item 7A, public hearing on, a resolution certifying supplemental environmental impact report 2002-13 and resolutions approving the general plan amendment and amendment to the Springville specific plan, et cetera. And I believe Mr. Vaca, will you lead us into
Yes.
this conversation?
I will. I'll be introducing Jackie Lee, Principal Planner, who will present on this agenda item and also have a supplemental presentation included by Michael Brown with Cadence Environmental Consulting. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Lee.
You're muted.
Ms. Lee, you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. So yeah, thank you, Mayor Tremblay and members of the City Council. Let me put up my presentation for you. So the City of Camarillo is considering requests for General Plan Amendment 2018-1, an amendment to the Springville Specific Plan, change of zone, and modification to tentative tract map 5671-2. The 43-acre project site, which is shaded on this map, is located at the northwest corner of Springville Drive and US 101, and is part of the larger 173.5-acre Springville Specific Plan area. The property is surrounded by single-family residences and open space to the north, US 101 to the south, agricultural fields to the west, Springville Drive to the east, and vacant commercial land across Springville Drive. The current general plan land use map designates the project site for institutional, semi-public, medium-density residential, low-medium-density residential, neighborhood park, and natural open space land uses, as shown in the map on the left. The applicant is requesting to amend the general plan land use map, as shown in the map on the right, to eliminate 3 acres of existing institutional semi-public and 7 acres of existing medium-density residential 10.1 to 18 dwelling units per acre designations. Also, to relocate the 5-acre park site designated public neighborhood park and expand the low-medium density residential 5.1 to 10 dwelling unit per acre designation from 14.5 acres to 20.36 acres. And also to expand the natural open space area by 4.14 additional acres to include an agricultural buffer and a berm. The proposed general plan amendment would reduce the overall density within the proposed project site from low, medium, and medium density residential to only low, medium density residential. The size of the park site would continue to be 5 acres. However, the shape would be modified from a long and narrow shaped parcel to a more square-shaped parcel. The Pleasant Valley Recreation and Park District supports the relocation of the future park site as it provides for better access and opportunities for more amenities. On this slide is the existing adopted Springville specific plan land use map. It uses slightly different land designation labels, but is generally consistent with the existing general plan land use designations. The area under consideration tonight for an amendment to the land use plan is outlined in the fuchsia color dashed line on this slide. The Springville specific plan currently allows for up to 200 dwelling units on the project site. The Springville specific plan land use map is proposed to be amended in order to be consistent with the proposed general plan amendment, which is shown on this slide. The amendment to the specific plan would eliminate the medium density residential designation, allowing only for low medium density residential development to occur on the project site, and would reduce the number of units from a maximum of 200 dwelling units to a maximum of 159 dwelling units. Although the project proposes to reduce the density and the number of units on the project site, an amendment to the specific plan is required to increase the overall number of units permitted within the overall 173-acre specific plan area from a maximum of 1,350 dwelling units to a maximum of 1,365 dwelling units. As projects were approved within the specific plan area, projects including the Springville Senior Apartments, the Amley Apartments, and the Adagio Affordable Apartments resulted in more units than anticipated in the specific plan. As a result, including the proposed project, the total number of units would be 1,365. The specific plan is proposed to be amended to place a final cap in the specific plan on 1,365 units. The specific plan amendment would also reduce the amount of commercial space on the existing vacant commercial zone property on the east side of Springville Drive from a maximum of 150,000 square feet to a maximum of 100,000 square feet to be in line with the actual amount of commercial square footage that could be built based on the maximum lot coverage. Under the current zoning map, the project site is zoned open space, rural exclusive, professional office, and residential plan development, which is shown on the map on the left. The map on the right shows the proposed change in zone to eliminate the professional office zone, to relocate the 5-acre future park site, which is zoned rural exclusive, expand the open space zone to include 4.14 acres for the berm and agricultural buffer, and then the remaining 20.36 acres zone residential plan development is proposed to add a suffix of 8 units per acre to be consistent with the proposed low-medium density land use designation. The proposed change of zone is consistent with the proposed general plan amendment and specific plan amendments. Tentative tract map 5671-2 for the area west of Springville Drive was previously approved to be subdivided into 6 major parcels. The applicant is now proposing to modify the tentative tract map to subdivide approximately 43 acres into 168 lots, including 159 for-sale single-family detached residential parcels, a 5.1 acre future park site, a 0.3 acre private recreational lot for the residents of the subdivision, and an 8.2 acre lot for open space. The project proposes a density of 7.8 units per acre, which is consistent with the proposed RPD 8U zoning. The proposed single-family lots are arranged in clusters of 4 to 6 lots sharing a common driveway. The proposed for-sale single-family detached residences will each have a private yard area and garage access from the common driveway. Access to the subdivision will be from Ponderosa Drive, which the developer is required to extend west of Springville Drive. The developer is also required to pave the existing Daily Drive frontage road along the existing agricultural property west of the project site to Central Avenue as a secondary emergency exit. The recommended conditions of approval require a traffic signal at the intersection of Ponderosa Drive and Springville Drive to be operational prior to the first occupancy of the first unit or model home. This is an illustrative map of the proposed subdivision. The Sholey farmhouse is proposed to be relocated approximately 290 yards to the southwest on lot 168 within the proposed development, and also it would be rehabilitated for the sale and occupancy as a single-family house. Other features of the proposed development include a paved footpath with a scenic lookout on the existing water access easement. Additionally, the proposed subdivision includes a Class 1 bike path, which will be completed all the way to Central Avenue. A 14-foot tall landscape berm along the north side of the 101 is required to be completed prior to the occupancy of the first residential unit and will match the existing berm completed in the Springville specific plan area. Should the City Council approve the requested general plan amendment, specific plan amendment, change of zone, and tentative tract map modification, the companion residential plan development permit will then be scheduled for consideration by the Planning Commission at a future date for review of the site plan details and architecture. The recommended conditions of approval require the developer to dedicate to the Pleasant Valley Recreation and Park District a 5-acre park site and to complete all the improvements. The District Board of Directors has approved the conceptual park plan, which includes approximately 2 acres of turf playfield, a children's play equipment area, pickleball and basketball courts, an outdoor fitness area, bocce ball court, cornhole play area, shade structures, fenced park area for dogs, and restrooms. The proposed subdivision also complies with the specific plan requirement to provide 20% affordable housing units. The specific plan has been developed in 3 major phases, starting with the Amley Apartments, which includes 309 market rate units and was required to provide 62 affordable units. However, the city negotiated with the developer to provide additional affordable units, and they built 75 affordable units. The Comstock, also known as the Laro section, has 312 market rate units, and they were required to provide 63 affordable units. and that was fulfilled with the 60-unit affordable Adagio apartments and 3 for-sale units in the Air Townhome development. The remaining last section is the Rancho portion that will have 502 market rate units, including the 158 proposed new units, which requires 101 affordable units. The Springville Seniors Affordable Apartments was built to satisfy this requirement and provides 103 affordable units. The requirement to provide affordable housing units has been implemented as the specific plan was developed through the conditions of approval and various affordable housing agreements, starting with the Amley project in 2013. Overall, the specific plan will have a total of 1123 market rate units and 241 affordable units for a total of 1364 units, not including the Sholey House. Staff has reviewed the proposed general plan amendment against the review criteria in City Council Policy 7.01 for non-city initiated general plan amendments, the community goals, and the general plan goals, and finds that the project is consistent with the goals of the city. Specifically, these include that the project will provide a walking path with a scenic lookout, new 5-acre park with a range of recreational opportunities, approximately 12 acres of open space, private recreation lot, and Class 1 bike path. The project provides for housing diversity to the city's housing stock by allowing an opportunity for additional single-family detached units. The historic Sholey Farmhouse will be relocated and rehabilitated for sale and occupancy as a single-family residence on the project site. Approximately 12 acres of natural open space will be preserved, and no amendment to the Camarillo urban restriction boundary or curb is necessary. And to discuss the environmental review that was conducted for the project, I'm going to turn the presentation over to the city's consultant, Michael Brown, with Cadence Environmental Consultants.
Thank you, Jackie. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Tremblay and City Council members. It's nice to be with you this evening. I appreciate the opportunity to be of assistance to you with this project. I want to go through a little history of the environmental analysis for not only this project, but for the overall specific plan. So the Springville Specific Plan EIR was certified by the City Council on January 9th, 2008. That document evaluated the development of up to 1,500 residential units, up to 150,000 square feet of retail and office space, 15 acres of public parkland, open space, and public space. The city then approved the EIR preferred development alternative, which was EIR alternative number 4, which included the development of up to 1,350 residential units, up to 150,000 square feet of retail and office space, 10 acres of parkland, open space, and public space. The EIR determined that all impacts would be similar to or less than those of the original specific plan proposal, and that all mitigation measures that were identified in the EIR for the original specific plan proposal continued to be applicable to the preferred development alternative. The EIR was not revised to limit its applicability to the preferred development alternative, and the EIR continues to be applicable to all development within the specific plan area. The proposed specific plan amendment, as Jackie just went through, increases the overall residential unit count of the specific plan from 1,350 units up to 1,365 units. So a 15 unit increase. And it reduces the amount of commercial space from 150,000 square feet to 100,000 square feet, a reduction of 50,000 square feet. The impacts of the proposed specific plan amendment and tract map are evaluated in the supplemental EIR, which, as the title states, supplements the information and conclusions of the certified EIR. There are no new or increased impacts for the following environmental issues: land use and planning, agricultural resources, biological resources, aesthetics, population and housing, transportation, traffic, air quality, noise, geology and soils, hazards and hazardous materials, hydrology, water quality, public services, and utilities and service systems. Basically, all the development of the approved specific plan would still occur within the same boundaries, and that there would be an overall reduction in the amount of development within that same area. There was one new potential impact that was evaluated in detail in the supplemental EIR, and that deals with, and that's for cultural resources, and specifically the relocation of the historic Scholey farmhouse. The certified EIR identified mitigation measures to provide fencing and protection of the farmhouse and a packing shed that was at the site. There was no requirement for the restoration or reuse of these structures. The packing shed collapsed, however, during a strong Santa Ana wind event in 2008, and the materials were subsequently cleared away. As part of the supplemental EIR analysis, we provided an updated historic resource analysis for that structure. And the farmhouse has been determined to be a significant historic resource that is eligible for listing on the National Register of Historic Places, the California Register of Historical Resources, and as a historic landmark in the city of Camarillo. The applicant is now proposing to relocate the farmhouse approximately 290 yards to the southwest within proposed lot 168 and to rehabilitate the structure as a single-family residence. New mitigation measures are identified in the supplemental EIR that address the proposed relocation and rehabilitation of the structure pursuant to the Secretary of the Interior's standards for the treatment of historic properties. Per the CEQA guidelines, these measures would reduce impacts to a less than significant level. The draft supplemental EIR was circulated for public review from June 12th of this year until July 27th. A total of 64 letters and emails were received by the city in response to the draft supplemental EIR. 60 of these letters and emails requested preservation of the Scholey farmhouse. The final supplemental EIR that you have before you this evening responds to the comments that were received regarding the draft supplemental EIR. It provides revisions to the text of the draft supplemental EIR, updates the mitigation monitoring and reporting program of the certified EIR. The text changes in this document, in the final document, are largely based on the proposed relocation of the Scholey farmhouse to lot 168. The textual changes do not constitute a substantial revision as defined in the state CEQA guidelines, and recirculation of the draft supplemental EIR is not required. And that's my presentation for you now, and I will be answering your questions this evening. Thank you.
So to conclude staff's presentation, I just wanted to provide the following recommendations that were made by the Planning Commission at their meeting on October 20th. The Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend to the City Council certification of Supplemental EIR 2002-13. and approval of General Plan Amendment 2018-1, an amendment to the Springville Specific Plan, change of zone 328, and modification to tentative tract map 5671-2. And that concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Lee and Mr. Brown. Before we go to public hearing, do any members of the council have questions? Mr. Mulchay first, followed by Mrs. Craven.
Thank you very much. I think I only have 2 or 3 simple questions. It's my understanding in reducing the commercial space, that'll ultimately reduce the total number of car trips in that general area.
Yes, and Michael, you have some information to support that was provided in the supplemental EIR, if you could expand on that.
Yes, that let's see if I can pull that up here, but yes, it does result in a reduction there. Now, one thing that the supplemental EIR is based on the certified EIR, so we do not compare this current proposal to the approved specific plan. It's based on the comparison to the EIR analysis. However, for your information, this current proposal will result in a reduction of vehicle trips of over 2,000 trips per day compared to what is approved for the specific plan.
Okay. And I guess, Mr. Brown, the next question will probably be aimed at you. The Secretary of the Interior standards for refurbishing the Sholey farmhouse, as I understand it, what this will include is the relocation. To put it in simple terms, we're going to make sure the bones of this house are good, sound, safe, sturdy. There'll be an outside refurbishment, but on the interior, that'll be refurbished and or updated or anointed by whoever ends up buying the house, right?
That is absolutely correct. It primarily focuses on the, like you say, keeping the bones in place, keeping the exterior looking original as it was intended, but the interior can be modern for current residents.
And the ongoing maintenance and upkeep of that house will be burdened by the homeowner, whoever buys that. Okay, and not an HOA and not taxpayers or anyone else then?
No,
Okay.
this will be an individual property owner is my understanding.
Okay. Those are the only 2 initial questions I had. Okay.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Craven, I think you're next.
I just wanted to make sure I understand this right, but this is part of a specific plan that was approved previously, correct?
That's
Yes.
correct.
And if we did not approve this amendment tonight or sometime, then they could proceed with the previously approved plan.
Correct.
I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that.
Okay, Mr. Kildee.
I want to, the Sholey house, once it is moved and rehab, is it still considered historic? Is that destination, does that still?
That's correct. And specifically, keeping it as a residence within its existing area, within the specific plan area, the area that it currently is located, allows it to keep its historic standing. If we were to move it off property, for example, that could result in losing that status there. And that would be a significant and unavoidable impact of the project. But as proposed, in keeping it on site and rehabilitating it, yes, it keeps that status. And part of the proposal is to provide, like in the park area, a bit of information about the Sholey farmhouse and explaining its history there and why has that historic status.
I would just
Okay.
add to conclude that the proposed mitigation measures ultimately require that it be preserved in a historic fashion consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation of historic structures. It's part of this package.
Oh, okay, may I proceed, Mr. Mayor? With that, and I know all of us have been over there, some of that's in pretty tough shape right now. And is there any thinking of once that it gets relocated, how are we going to rehab it, up to current standards if some of it is not rehabable, if you will? Will that be a decision made at the time, or how would you go about that?
I would really tell you that it's been analyzed and it's practical, that it can be moved. The actual house can be moved. All the outbuildings will not be relocated. They won't be preserved. And Dennis Hardgrave has inspected the facility. He's the applicant. He'll be communicating his position on this project to the council and the public here in a few minutes. And I think it'd be good to circle back with him to get more information on the details of the move and preservation.
You all right? I do have a question on the commercial space. Would that be appropriate to ask Mr. Hargrave that question as well?
You could start with us.
So we're going to cut it down from, I believe, 150,000 square feet to 100,000. Obviously, there's a contraction going on. What's the theory on that? Is it a more marketable? Is it just the fact that the timing perhaps may not be right? And if that's the case, what would be the future of that?
I believe Mr. Hardgrave can provide more detailed information, but I would give you a summary, and that is that they've had a challenging time finding tenants that will utilize that much space. And it makes sense with shrinking footprints of brick and mortar to reduce the overall commercial square footage. And it's part of their anticipated build out that it will still be commercial, but they probably wouldn't need the full 150,000. So since we're working on the specific plan amendment now, it makes sense to incorporate that at this time.
Okay, and then I do have a comment about some traffic, perhaps mitigation techniques that we might be able to do on Ponderosa. I think it was, Michael, was it 200,000 extra trips per day that this will, at full build out, generate?
We actually have Jason Samonte with us and Dave Klotzel of Public Works, and I think it'd be appropriate if they could help respond to this.
Would we want to wait on that for other council members' comments and circle back to that as well?
If you want the question answered now, I think we can answer it now.
Can you? I'd like to have it now if you have the
Yes, so I'll defer to
answer to
Mr.
that.
Klotzel.
Yes, yeah, good evening, council. Jason Samonte, our traffic engineer, is available also. And I guess as far as the specific question on number of trips, I don't know that that's related specifically to this project. And it may relate more to the information in the environmental document regarding traffic. Michael, is that a specific item mentioned in the document?
In the EIR, we show that the proposed changes for the overall specific plan will result in a reduction in vehicle trips. Now, specifically compared to the approved uses of the specific plan, we're talking about a reduction of over 2,000 vehicle trips per day associated with the action tonight.
Right. Okay. So thank you for that clarification. Councilmember Kildee, if that made sense, it's actually a reduction in trips that are going to be experienced by this proposed project.
Okay. I just, we've had an inordinate amount of traffic down there, and my thought process with this is, yes, it's a reduction. However, is there any, ideas or any conversations or thoughts that we might be able to put some sort of signage or striping or something like that that might, to a certain extent, help that situation there?
I'm not too sure exactly the situation you're referring to as far as the vehicle trips that are occurring now and then will occur with this project, which again is a reduction over the originally proposed project. But if you're referring to in general traffic on our arterial roadways, the arterials have been planned within the circulation element, considering these developments coming to be. And that's why, for instance, Ponderosa is a 4-lane arterial with a median because it is a major arterial and designed to accommodate the levels of traffic that are experienced now and are anticipated into the future. So as far as roadway design elements, the projects that have been constructed and that this project will construct the extension of Ponderosa will be required to be constructed according to our standards for the arterial roadway and include all the required striping and signage for that type of a road.
So the striping and signage potentially could be part of this proposal. And my next question is there any opportunities for any other traffic lights to be installed out there?
So as was mentioned, that the project is conditioned to install the traffic signal at Springville and Ponderosa. That's currently a 90-degree turn northbound to eastbound, with this development moving forward to create a T intersection with Ponderosa going through to the west into the development is going to require the installation of a traffic signal at that location. The rest of the Springville specific plan and the construction that has occurred out there to date, as you recall recently, 2 of the signals that were conditioned have already been installed at Earl Joseph and Ponderosa and Camino Terra Santa and Ponderosa. And those are in compliance with the conditions of approval for those other projects that have been constructed out there. And there's one last intersection that will be studied in the future to see if warrants are met at Spring Oak Road and Ponderosa also for the possibility of additional traffic signal. All of that in accordance with the Springville specific plan, environmental documents for traffic mitigation. So those are the plans and signals that have been built and the future signals that will be and possibly will be built based on meeting warrants. That's what is in the plan for the future.
So it looks like there'll be one more traffic signal constructed and built in that area then.
Correct. As far as related to this specific project, that signal at Springville and Ponderosa will be constructed as a part of this project.
That's all I have, Your Honor. Thank you.
Mr. Kildee, Ms. Santangelo?
So I just wanted to clarify something because I think at first glance, it can look like this project that the proposed change is adding units from 1350 to 1365. And I just want to clarify that the reason for that change is because of units that are already built, that this proposed change is actually decreasing the amount of units going into this area that's on the west side of the plan. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that was it. I just wanted to clarify that for the public so they don't think that we're squeezing more units in. We're actually making this area of the plan less dense. So.
Mr. Kildee, another question?
Sorry, yeah, I just have one follow-up. I neglected to ask this. Will there be affordable units on this proposal?
So there will not be any additional affordable units on this project site because they have already fulfilled their requirement to provide the affordable units when the Springville Seniors Apartments were built, and that had 103 affordable units that were built. They actually have a surplus of 2 affordable units even after this project if it were to be approved.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, any other questions from council members before we go to public hearing? Mr. Milche?
I think two other quick ones. There are approximately 20, I might be off, 26 parking spots for the park. Is there any concern that that's inadequate?
No, there isn't. We have Mary Otten available to answer questions on the specifics of the design of the park. That's in conceptual plan for the item before you this evening. And we understand that all of the items that have been included in the conceptual design have been approved by PVRPD to date.
Okay. Second, the 20-foot wide bike and pedestrian trail as it traverses adjacent to the 101, eventually it either meets up and or runs alongside this additional access road, vehicle access road at the southwest portion of the development going all the way to Central.
Yes.
Are both of those being paid by the developer all the way to Central?
It's partly developer and partly CIP.
Okay. Yeah, I know that the council we had discussed that and had moved some things forward on that. What is a bike trail being taken care of within the kind of confines of the development?
Dave Klotzel, are you available?
Yes. Yes, thank you. Right. Councilmember Milche, you're likely referring to the capital improvement projects we have identified for. We've already been doing some conceptual studies out there for the bike trail on that location. And then with the implementation of this project moving forward and the requirement for the project to have an access road from the project out to Central, we're coordinating with the developer with the conditions that the developer would build all of that, and the city would have a contribution or a share of the cost in that. The details of how that'll be worked out as far as cost share, there are instruments that we can apply with offsetting some of the fees required by the development in lieu of the city paying for and constructing the project. So essentially it'll be a city contribution for a portion of that bike trail. But moving forward with the development, designing and constructing it will be a very cost-effective way for that improvement to get built.
Where the vehicle access road meets up to the bike trail, do those become one in the same, or are those two separate that run parallel?
They'll be separate, running parallel. Class 1 bike trail with physically separated. They'll be very close together within the same width area, but likely a curb of separation and essentially a dedicated bike and pedestrian path separate from the roadway.
All right, thank you.
All right, any other questions? I had a couple, but I think other council members already asked them, and so they've been answered. All right, at this time then, we're going to open the public hearing on this item. And I would ask if there is anyone who wishes to make a public comment on this item, and if so, would they please raise their hand? I know that we have the applicant, Mr. Hargrave, in attendance. Is there anyone who wishes to address the council on this item?
So Tony, our first speaker is Dennis Hardgrave, and I have promoted him as a panelist, so he should be able to make his presentation now.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Hargrave.
Good evening, Mayor Tremblay, members of the City Council, Vice Mayor Santangelo. Glad to be with you tonight. And for some reason, I'm not on video, so let me start video. There, that's a lot easier. I guess that's part of my promotion, right? So thank you. You can hear me okay? Great. All right. I'm Dennis Hardgrave. I'm the planning manager for the owners. That's Ran and Rancho Associates. We've worked closely with the city staff and Pleasant Valley Rec and Park District for 4 years on this final phase of the Springville specific plan. I personally have worked on the Springville project for a little over a decade, stepped into it when we were trying to work out the negotiations to get the Springville interchange agreement finalized, and then to actually dedicate the land for the off-ramps and get the road interchange funded and constructed. And the property owners, as a few of you council members and some staff will recall, actually built the roadway ahead of what was required by condition. The city had additional funding left because they managed their funds well on the interchange construction. And we dedicated land ahead of our maps being approved to extend Ponderosa Drive to the Springville interchange. And we were able to actually use the interchange before there was any development out there. So it's been quite a long process. A few of you are familiar with the whole history. The actual Springville history goes back over 30 years, and I wasn't part of that early part of that specific plan. But I just want to give you an overview tonight. And if we could go to slide number 4, which is the GPA request. And it's probably a good one if Jackie can put that up. That's a great one for us to, oh, there we go. That's a good one for me, I think, to refer to for part of this conversation. And you've raised some questions. I'll probably go through my presentation first, and then if we want to, we can circle back to those questions. But most recently, we've also begun to work very closely with representatives of both the Historical Society and the San Buenaventura Conservancy to finalize a really creative plan that accomplishes several objectives. Overall, the project is a reduction, as staff has said, in overall density in this phase of the project. It's a reduction in overall daily traffic for the Springville project, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. It's unique for Camarillo in that it creates a beautiful and highly functional park gateway at one of our main entrances to the city. Very unusual to have something like that, and I'm really think it's a great mix for the neighborhood. And as we just heard you discuss, it establishes a new Class 1 bike path within the Springville specific plan that extends all the way to Central and has the capacity to go along the other side of the Springville specific plan because there's already a road in place on that side between the berm and the freeway. So we can have roughly another mile plus of bike path on that side too. Most significantly, we've mutually come up with a plan that preserves the Scholey House within the setting of the planned neighborhood. As you've seen, if you've read all the environmental documentation, the Scholey House is one of the few remaining 1800s buildings in the city, and it is one of the oldest in the early Springville settlement. So it's really got an interesting history. I can talk about the house questions a little later. I think maybe it's best to just roll through this first. The specific plan amendment, and I work with specific plans all the time. We write them with people, we create them for cities, and we implement them. They're designed to be flexible documents so that we can make changes as conditions change. This actual specific plan, if you see the EIR year on it, 2002, this actual design is over 20 years old now from when it was first drawn. So obviously the world has changed an awful lot since then. So it's a great tool, a specific plan, as long as you maintain some flexibility with it. But this is a logical improvement over the approved one for several reasons. One, the original specific plan proposed either office or institutional semi-public use where the park will be. The Ventura County Airport standards, as they now stand, would prohibit any high occupancy uses at this portion of the flight zone. This is actually what's known as the right turn in approach to Camarillo Airport. You don't see it an awful lot, but it's used. And so as a result, the airport authority will not allow high occupancy uses that would be in institutional, such as a church, a school, or an assisted living facility. There's also a glut of office space in this city, 20% by some estimates. And so that is really not a rational use for some new land here. Additionally, the park at the west edge, as Jackie mentioned, was long and narrow and had little public access, no visibility, and little function because it sloped downhill more on the west end of the site. The new location resolves all of those issues. It's rectangular and much flatter. In 2008, we have to recognize that you go back to the year 2000, there was also the potential at that time that there may be a future phase of the Springville development going west of the edge that you see on the map you have now. That is not in any long-range planning forecast for the city. So that's another reason why a park on the west edge isn't that rational. As staff has stated, there were 200 units in the area, including some at condo density, which would have involved 3-story units like you've seen in other parts of the Springville specific plan, and they would have been attached units. Those units would have been in the orange area in the image on your left, near the off-ramp. That's now a portion of the park, and the rest of it's 2-story detached single-family homes now. The proposed plan is only detached homes, and they're all 2-story. There are no 3 stories. There are no 1 stories either because they're small lot subdivisions. The proposed project's been thoroughly evaluated and shown to have no new impacts, as staff has said. In fact, there's only a slight 5-unit increase. And as everybody's talked about pretty clearly, you've run through the numbers, this increase is really primarily because the Springville specific plan built 15 extra affordable units. So if you do the math, we're 15 over on this total project, but the benefit was that the city got 15 additional affordable units over what the project was required to do, if you look at the table that staff put up a little earlier. In exchange for this perceived minor increase in density, the proposed specific plan will reduce the commercial development. The project will also eliminate that potential office or institutional development. And as far as the traffic goes, maybe I can kind of unpack it a little bit. The removal of 50,000 square feet of commercial based on the EIR trip rates eliminates 2,525 daily trips off of Ponderosa Drive. It's just a simple math factor of 50,000 square feet times how many trips per 1,000 square feet in the EIR. So that's 25 trips that would have come out of that 50,000 feet of commercial. The 15 units add 132 daily trips. So basically it's 25 lost, 132 gained. It's a 94% decrease in trips from this particular part of the bubble that's being dealt with tonight. So it is definitely a decrease overall. The only place there's an increase in trips is when you run the factor for commercial. Shopping centers don't have much traffic in the morning rush hour because most people don't go to the grocery store at 7 to 9 a.m. But the increase is actually only a net of 3 net trips per hour. So in other words, these trips have a very slight increase. That's 2 cars leaving and 1 car coming back is how the traffic report analyzes it. So it's 1 extra car every 20 minutes. We don't notice 1 car per minute, much less 1 car per 20 minutes when we're evaluating traffic. So additionally, I know Councilmember Kildee mentioned the amount of traffic on Ponderosa. I'm pretty certain, based on my observations and understanding of traffic modeling, that the Ponderosa segments west of Las Posas all must operate at level of service A or B. They are all far below capacity. I can't imagine they're any worse than that. If you look at it, since the signals have been installed, it's very smooth. This 3rd signal will help with queuing even more. It'll be more of a encouragement for people to slow down some more. So there is actually no environmental impact under that. And actually under state CEQA law at this point, level of service is not truly an environmental impact anymore. You have to deal with vehicle miles traveled. And so this does not create an EIR issue by the net 3 morning trips, but otherwise the 2,500 trips reduced throughout the day. So finally, just to kind of summarize, the project will build the park and bike path. It'll provide the scenic overlook and great Channel Islands and mountain views when you hike up that little hill up there. There is a road up there already you can take. Construct a traffic signal at Ponderosa and Springville. It'll contribute SEBA fees to the city and traffic fees and help pay off some CFD debt that you have on a sewer force main. And just so you understand, you're not looking at the project, but if you go to slide 11, I think that's the illustrative site plan, Jackie. And if you look at that, I can just give you a kind of an overview. We've designed this project to be similar to the very successful Camden homes at Village at the Park. I don't know if you specifically know which ones they are, but when you turn in off Pleasant Valley Road at Village Commons Boulevard, where the fountain is, and you come up the street, those are small lot detached single family homes with a shared driveway. And what we've done with this, we've improved it by adding driveway aprons far above what the code requires, and we have overparked the project. So we've addressed that, and we think this was such a successful project, highly desirable in resale, and we think it gives a nice lower key reduced density vibe to this whole neighborhood. And we're very happy with this and glad we could do it. One thing I would say about the parking in response to Councilmember Mulcahy's comment, we did work out that with the Park and Rec Department. And also we have, if you look right where it says Street E, we do not have any homes that front out on the park. So the potential conflict of car driveways across from a park is not there. All of those people's parking and there's actually a 6-foot side wall, patio wall between along that greenbelt edge right there. So those people will not be parking there for their homes. So there is even some overflow beyond what we have. But this is only 1 2-acre play field in terms of really heavily activity area. So it's not a tournament sports site. Believe me, I know tournament sports sites. I live in one. So I think we're, I think we'll all be fine with this approach. At the end, this, there will also be a private recreation area, and the Sholey House will be integrated into the neighborhood, which we think is a great solution. And we will be doing historical signage and imagery in the park to explain the history of the Springville area. Most people don't know that a lot of Springville disappeared when the Oxnard Army Air Base was built during World War II. And that's now the Camarillo Airport. So this is one of the last town pieces there from before the freeway. So we'll have some graphics there we'll work on with the Historical Society for that. I urge your support as this project has historical community support, logical planning, and it really is an improvement over what is allowed by right on this property under the existing specific plan and approved track map. There's very few unbuilt detached units approved or pending in the city, if you think about that. And almost everything that's approved or pending is age restricted. So we have a real gap in what's available for new housing for the next probably 4 years. I don't see a horizon that we're going to get too much on, knowing how long this takes to do. We're 4 to 5 years solid work getting to here. So it's a long road to get there. So this project will begin construction in 2021. At least that's the proposal right now. We intend to go immediately into construction drawings and hope to break ground in 2021, assuming design approval and COVID and culture and everything else holds up for us. Thank you. I'd like to reserve the right to make any closing comments, to address any issues that come up, and I'm also here for questions. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Hargrave. Do any members of the council have questions for the applicant before I go to any public comments? Mr. Kildee.
Yeah, Mr. Hargrave, I know you had mentioned that the commercial will be cut down, I believe, from 150,000 square feet to 100,000. Is there any plans that you are able to share about the future of that parcel within this parcel, if you will?
Yes, and actually this is all pre-COVID information I'll share with you, because it's obviously the whole world is upside down in terms of anything related to the commercial and market of any kind. We, for the last 5 years on the parcel, that's the parcel we're talking about right off the picture here to the right. It's the remaining 6.91 acres that's fenced in, that's dirt between the Springville ramp and the senior apartments, right? So there's a parcel there. We have approached every grocery operator, every shopping center operator, and no grocery operators want to come to the site. One, it's what they call 180-degree trade area. There's nothing on the south side of us, and it's well served by Ralph's. It's well served by Walmart groceries. It's well served by Target, and on and on. And so Camarillo is not in a position. Even before COVID, we had no luck at this site nor at a comparable site at Village at the Park. We've had no luck getting commercial tenants to come to those locations. So I'm just being very blunt about that. The market was not good then. The only users that express interest are users that we would put in front of the council but they are a challenge, and they're not necessarily what people want to see. Gas station, drive-through Starbucks, and a hotel. And hospitality is not in the cards right now at all. There are no hotel planners, no hotels are moving forward with new projects at this time. So right now, there are no good prospects for that property. So I think it's a justifiable change to do this at this point to lower the cap. So does that answer your question?
Yes, I have a follow-up. Will there be a homeowners association associated with this project?
Yes, this would have its own homeowners association, separate from all the different homeowners associations east of Springville Drive. But there's at least 2 master associations east of Springville Drive in the Springville specific plan, but we will have one in this as well. And they'll maintain the berm and the landscape, and the park district will maintain the park.
Do I see a pool in this plan here?
You do. It is in the proposal. It's in the budget from the builder who is proposing to purchase this property from our client.
Are you at liberty to name who that builder may be?
I really can't at this point. Hopefully be able to do that within 30 days. A lot of that's pending what happens tonight. How's that?
Thank you, Mr. Hargrave. That's all I have, Your Honor.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you. Any other questions, Madam Vice Mayor?
I am, thank you for being here. I'm wondering where is like guest parking? Is it street parking?
Yeah, these streets are not skinny little streets. They're 36 feet wide. They're as wide as the public streets that are on the backside that are on almost any cul-de-sac you go to in town. And in addition, the people have driveway aprons. So in other words, this is not like a townhome product you see sometimes that has no driveway aprons and then has little skinny 26-foot wide fire lanes with perpendicular stalls. The only perpendicular stalls in the project are over at the park. And that was intentional so that they could maximize parking without creating a giant parking lot. This was the best way to get them a really usable park.
Got it. Thank you. That's all I had.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Craven.
I just have one question. I don't see a street D, but streets, oh, I do see a street D. Streets A, B, C, D, and E, are they private streets?
They are private. Ponderosa is the only public street, and the landscape behind the curb is public right of way, but privately maintained by the HOA.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions for Mr. Hargrave? All right, we thank you, Mr. Hargrave. If you could stand by.
Okay.
For any additional questions. Let's move to is there anyone that wishes to make a public comment on this item? And if there is anyone, please raise your hand. I don't see anyone on my screen. Madam Clerk, do you see anybody?
I don't see anybody either.
All right. With that, we're going to close the public hearing and bring it back to council for further discussion and action. Who would like to start? Mr. Kildee.
Unmute. I've been involved in this since inception. actually. And if you look at what's happening out here and the way that they reconfigured the park here, I think which would be much more accessible. And I'm a big believer in having parks that are you're able to use them. Passive parks are one thing, but I think nowadays, because of the shortage of the lands that we've got, I think it's very, very important to have a park that people can use, and hopefully some younger families will be able to move out here. And there's nothing like a park, a very visible park, to help enhance an area here. I'm pleased to see that they can finally move on the Sholey House. As many of us know, we've been working on this for, it seems like decades to a certain extent, but several years here. Some of it's in pretty tough shape. I'm going to be interested to see how it looks when it's all constructed here. But I'm pleased to see that. I've also, the affordability, I think, is a real important issue with me, and I know it's an important issue with several of us. But to be able to have the area have somewhat of a surplus in the affordability units there, I think is important. I think the traffic signal at, I believe it's Springville and Ponderosa, is very necessary there, I think, for the traffic flows, and hopefully to get people to not drive fast, as fast as sometimes they go there. There's nothing like a beautification project, I think, to slow traffic down too. That's just my own personal opinion. We'll talk a little bit about the commercial space going from, I believe, 150,000 to 100,000. I think that's positive, and the nature of commercial space as we see it in our country right now. So those issues and others. Also, I think it's important to have some single family constructed until the state tells us whether or not we'll be able to do this in the future or not, and that is up for discussion as well. I was pleased to see the parking here and the parking for the park here, to have enough parking there, which is really important here. The HOA with the pool, a lot of amenities, I think, which is really important for new housing now. I think this is a very strong plan. I think it's led by the reconfiguration of the park here. I think they're going to be, this will be a real positive, improvement to that area as well. So for those reasons and others, I can support this. My hope is that they can get going on it sooner rather than later, because I think the demand is there, and it'll kind of, complete to a certain extent the process that's been started several years ago now. And I'm also excited about the bike path and the walkable nature that this potentially could have too. So I think they've touched a lot of bases with this, and I can support this new and improved plan. And those are my thoughts, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to go next? Ms. Santangelo?
So really, this is, for anybody watching or wondering about this, just to clarify again, this is not approving a new project or addition or extending this project. This is really talking about a change from the original plan to this plan, which I see as a huge improvement. I'm not going to go through all the reasons. Mr. Kildee did a great job of that, but I think, especially moving the park more central to the entire Springville area is a huge improvement. I do think there's a need for some detached single-family homes. So I think this is, for all the reasons we've talked about, an improvement, and I support this change.
Thank you. Mrs. Craven?
I thought Mr. Mulchay was ahead of me.
Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't see him raise his hand.
Okay, I will take it. Thank you. I'm going to seem a little repetitive. I will say, you know, I have been outspoken in the past about Springville development as a whole. There's certain aspects I have not liked about it. I was not on the council in 2002 when this was originally conceived or applied for, conceived. I wasn't on the council in 2008 when the EIR was originally certified. But what I will always, what I will agree to is where improvements can be made on something as originally conceived, I'll certainly support it. And this is certainly one of those situations. The vice mayor said she wouldn't go down the list. I'm going to go down the list really quick. The fact that it is an improvement on open space and park space. I'm really happy with what happened here with the park space and how that was reconfigured, because I think that's, and I ask about parking because I look at that and I go, that's going to be a dang popular park. I mean, that's got so much of what everyone wants in a park. So that's the parking for the park is my biggest concern. But aside from that, I can't be happier with how that's been conceived, and how you guys and the city and the park district have worked together in putting that together. Traffic, fewer daily car trips, the preservation of the Sholey House. I was inbound on a lot of comments. I saw a lot of comments circling around online about people's concerns about the Sholey House and how that was going to be preserved, if at all. I'm really glad that we kind of landed on this. Actually, I really like this. The HOA isn't responsible for it. Taxpayers aren't responsible for it. We can put it in the hands of a private homeowner. There's a lot of properties like this down south, and usually you find someone who's really loves these kind of properties, and they're willing to invest their heart and soul and their money into to renovating the interior and really upkeeping it. And I think that's an excellent approach. I'll just say this reduces the density, and say what you want about housing. There's certainly a lot of critics about housing, but at least what we're changing here is less dense housing and more housing that everyone thought was pretty much extinct. When you see detached single family homes, nowadays all it is mixed use and high density apartment buildings. And so when you have an opportunity to provide the community with some housing like this, which is certainly much needed, then we might as well take that opportunity, make that change, because I think it's a beneficial change. Aside from that, and a few other reasons, I can definitely support this.
Craven.
Yeah, I have some comments. Even before I was first elected in 1986, I recognized that this piece of land on the west side of the city was one of the last few that would be developed. So I supported its annexation to the city and the creation of a specific plan that I think we dealt with in 1997 for the area, so that the various types of housing and services for those residents would be appropriate. And so that a circulation plan that would resolve some of our huge traffic problems we were having on southbound Las Posas. And I think we do need to get in here, since we've talked so much about traffic, this whole circulation plan and this specific plan really resolved level D and F traffic concerns we had at Las Posas near Daly and Ponderosa. So I understand the reasons for the requested changes. Circumstances change with times, and the circumstances that were in effect in 2008 when this plan was approved by the City Council were not the same as they are today. The location of the park did need to be moved. This specific plan includes the plan to preserve the Sholey House, and most people want lots of different type of housing, and we need single family detached. Therefore, I can support all of the three requests. However, I do have some concerns about the number of low-income housing units that have come about as this plan came into fruition. I've had lively conversations with staff yesterday and today, and I also understand very clearly that at this point in time, we cannot put on this small part of the large specific plan development the onus of completing all of the units that I and my counterparts on the council thought would be built when we approved the specific plan in 2011. Although the council thought that the plan designates at least 20% of the total residential development as affordable housing for lower income households was straightforward and clear, it apparently was not clear to the staff that was here at the time when the plan first began to be implemented, who interpreted that statement to mean 20% of the market rate housing, which is a lower number that is required of low and very low income units than was built. As I said, I will support this, but after we have dealt with this, I have more comments and a request of the council. But again, for all the reasons I've stated and for all the reasons all the rest of you have stated, I support the items up for approval tonight.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Craven. I'll try to be succinct in my remarks. I'm in general agreement with Mr. Mulchay philosophically regarding Springville overall. But that said, this is a substantial improvement in my mind to the original plan, especially regarding the relocation of the park, which I know is supported by the Recreation and Park District, and that's materially important to me. Secondly, the preservation and rehabilitation of the Scholey House, which I think is a very good thing. And thirdly, the decrease in density. So for all those reasons, I can support this as well. Let me ask for some guidance from Mr. Pierik on this. We have 5 suggested actions in our staff report. Mr. Pierik, would you recommend that we take each of these individually or together?
My advice is that you take them individually.
All right. With that in mind, may I hear a motion from council? Mrs. Craven.
I move to adopt a resolution certifying the supplemental environmental impact report number 2002-13.
I'll second that.
All right, there's a motion and a second as to that item. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Craven,
Yes.
Councilmember Kildee,
Yes.
Councilmember Mulchay,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Santangelo,
Yes.
Mayor Tremblay.
Yes.
That motion carries unanimously.
May I
I
hear a
move to
motion?
adopt a resolution approving general plan amendment GPA 2018-1.
I'll second.
I'll withdraw.
I think the tie went to the runner. The second was by the Vice Mayor. And so, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Craven,
Yeah.
Councilmember Kildee,
Yes.
Councilmember Mulchay,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Santangelo,
Yes.
Mayor Tremblay.
Yes.
That motion carries unanimously.
Thank
I'll
you.
adopt a resolution approving a request for the amendment to the Springville specific plan.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second on that item. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Craven,
Yes.
Councilmember Kildee,
Yes.
Councilmember Mulchay,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Santangelo,
Yes.
Mayor Tremblay.
Yes.
That motion carries unanimously.
As to the next item, can we request a reading of the ordinance by title only?
No, I seem to not have the ordinance by the title only. So could I ask the city clerk to read that, please?
Hold, please.
We could request a reading of the whole ordinance.
Frankly, I seem to have misplaced my agenda, so I'm not quite sure how I did that, but
That's right. Hopefully we'll find it here momentarily.
yeah, just give me 1 second.
Brian, I'm prepared to read it if you'd like me to pinch hit.
Did you find the page number, Joe?
Tell me the number again.
Yeah, for the ordinance is on page 155.
The ordinance number is 1176.
I got that much. Yeah, could you read it, Mary?
So we will have a reading of the title of the ordinance.
Yeah, could you read the title? Do you have it?
I will, yes. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Camarillo for a change of zone from 3 acres zoned professional office and 21.5 acres zoned residential plan development permit to approximately 4.14 acres zoned open space and approximately 20.36 acres zoned residential plan development permit, 8 units per acre maximum, and relocation of 5 acres zoned rural exclusive for a future park site located at the northwest corner of Springville Drive and US 101 Ventura Freeway in the Springville Specific Plan area, further described as change of zone 328.
Move the approval.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Craven,
Yes.
Councilmember Kildee,
Yes.
Councilmember Molche,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Santangelo,
Yes.
Mayor Tremblay.
Yes.
That motion carries unanimously.
And we have a final form of suggested action. Anybody wish to make that motion?
I'll move to adopt a resolution approving a modification to tentative track map 5671-2, TT 5671-2M, parens 3, subject to the conditions of approval. And I'll just add there are 117 conditions of approval.
I'll second that motion.
Are we intending to read all those conditions of approval?
Would you please?
I'm sorry, bad joke. All right, we have a motion and a second on that item. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Craven,
Yes.
Councilmember Kildee,
Yes.
Councilmember Molche,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Santangelo,
Yes.
Mayor Tremblay.
Yes.
That motion carries unanimously.
All right, very well. Thank you very much. We are now concluded on that item. I believe, Mrs. Craven, we're going to hear from you as to the continuation of your oral communications with respect to this item. As soon as you go off mute.
Sorry. Maybe you'd prefer that I stay on mute. I thought it was more appropriate to reserve these comments till after the previous item was taken up so that I didn't confuse people and make them think I was against that. But last week I stated that for years I'd asked the city clerk and at least 3 planning directors to direct me to our policy on the placement of low and very low income housing in the city. I knew we had the policy, but nobody could find it. And consequently, the reply always came back, I don't think we have such a policy. Yet there it was in last week's packet, City Council Policy 7.09. It turns out that it couldn't be located because of the title and the searchable words, design and dispersal of inclusionary affordable units, which made it unsearchable for the terms I was asking to be searched. This week's packet held another surprise. The staff report on the Springville explained that the number of affordable units required for the total specific plan area was 225, and also explained that it was calculated as a percentage of the number of market rate units. That was the first time I'd heard anything was calculated as a percentage of market rate units instead of the number of total units. So I checked the wording of the specific plan, and you can too if you look at Roman numeral 4A in the packet on page 49. Top left, section 3.2.2, inclusionary housing says, and it seems clear to me, but I'll read the 2 of the 4 sentences that are short. Quote, the Springville specific plan residential component designates at least 20% of the total residential development as affordable housing for lower income households, paren, 10% low and 10% very low, paren. The balance of the Springville specific plan includes a mixture of moderate to upper income housing, end of quote. As I said, that wording seemed clear to me, and I believe it seemed clear to other members of the council who were here when that specific plan was approved. The developers originally asked for 1,350 units. And as I read the requirement, the 20% calculation of low and very low income housing should have been 270 units, not the 225 units stated in the packet. When I asked staff about the difference, I was told that the staff that was here when the plan was initially implemented interpreted the above statement to mean that the 20% would be calculated only from the number of market rate units that would be built. So instead of calculating from the total number of units, staff subtracted 20% off the top, getting 1,122 market rate units, and then took 80% of the 1,122 units number to come up with 225 affordable units that would be required. And that calculation has carried forward to the completion of the plan. To put it in simpler terms, 225 units is 20% of 80%, not 20% of 100%, as stated in the plan. Additionally, 225 units is only 16% of 1,350 units. There's a difference of 45 units. But as I said, what's done is done. I got it that this plan was implemented by different developers with different approvals and different construction at different times. So what's done is done as far as that one's concerned. However, what I want to do is define our terms, identify methods of calculation, and make sure that we word our policies as well as our general plan goals and programs in such a way that intent is even clearer, and so that council and staff are all on the same page when calculating the number of low and very low income units according to policy and general plan programs in the future. There are those who think that we may not have future specific plans for large areas. I don't know, but I do know that there are several large areas where it would be possible to have requests and specific plans developed. And I'm talking about these things for those in the future. I don't know if the policy committee would be charged with that or if the council as a whole wants to tackle it. But I would like it to be looked at so that in the future, staff and council will come up with the same number via the same method of calculation, and so that the policy will be searchable by official terms, not designations used that people use to be politically correct. So that's my request.
Mrs. Craven, if you are articulating that in terms of a request that be brought back, or that actually the council refer that to the policy committee for further review, Mr. Kildee?
I would support that.
I was about to support that as well. So Ms. Santangelo and Mr. Mulchay. So I think you've got consensus to support that. And we would ask then that that be brought to policy committee.
Can I make a comment?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I not only support it, I thank you for bringing that to our attention. That's important. That 45 units is a big deal. And I appreciate you bringing that to our attention. And, we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but we should make sure that it's consistent and understandable and that everybody has the same expectations for how we calculate, the requirements for affordable units. So thank you.
I agree with Ms. Santangelo. It's just, we need to get that nailed down. So it needs to be clear. All
Staff
right,
appreciates that also, and we look forward to getting that updated.
very well. Thank you, Mr. Vaca. All right, I think that takes us to the very end of our agenda for this evening. I don't think we have any other items pending. So with that, we will go ahead and